Hello and welcome back to Medieval Survival Guide. I named this 4th episode One with Nature because the subjects we'll cover today are going to be hunting, herbalism and alchemy, as well as everything in between. Again, I will assume that whoever watches this video is completely new to the game, so I will explain absolutely everything I can about the topics at hand. To compensate for the long intro in the previous episode, today we'll just jump right into the thick of it. First of all, hunting. If you don't stray from the main quest, you will go hunting within the first few hours of the game as part of a mission. If you don't care about improving your skills, you can cheese the quest by shooting the first rabbit you find, collecting its meat and waiting until 12 PM. Or you can just play the quest normally and compete with Sir Hans, shooting down as many rabbits as you can because doing so rewards you with an increase in your archery and hunting skills. Last I checked, archery had no perks, but hunting has quite a few useful ones, such as Forester, which makes you stealthier in forests, this stealth bonus being especially useful in bandit elimination missions. The hunting skill also offers you perks that increase the amount of stuff you can gather from animals, from antlers to offal, which sell for quite a tidy profit. If you wish to avoid stealing, poaching can be a viable alternative to making money, but if you carry poached meat in your inventory, watch out for the gameskeeper. He won't take it lightly. If you just wish to hunt and you see another person in the woods, just turn around and leave. I've strayed a bit off course, so let's get back to the quest. As you shoot rabbits, you will take their meat. The higher your hunting skill, the more of it you will take. You can then sell the meat to vendors in town, but if you have no horse to carry the flesh in its saddlebags, it will weigh you down quite a lot. So you might need to dispose of some of it to lighten your load. After this quest is done, you will get rewarded a free horse anyway, but it's best if you invested in one beforehand. Now, when you try selling the meat, it will be poached and thus considered a stolen item which most vendors will avoid buying. But you can launder the meat if you just cook it. Such a weird expression to use. Well, cooking this meat on a fire removes the stolen status and can then be safely sold to anyone for full price. That's what I mean when I say launder. Anyway, if you choose to hunt for money, don't overdo it because if you hunt down more than 3 deer, you'll have more meat than vendors can afford to buy and eventually it'll spoil and become worthless. Cooking the meat can slightly slow down the spoiling process, keeping it valuable for longer. As you roam through the world, you'll run across people asking you to bring them some game meat, and it would be nice of you to do these favors for them and increase your skill while you're at it. Some of these quests just ask you for meat, but others are way more specific and ask you to hunt either boars or deer or rabbits. So I'm gonna tell you where to find each of these. First of all, rabbits can be found pretty much everywhere. As for the other beasts, I will show you some hunting spots on the map of my first playthrough, so you can track them yourself. Now I'm going to share some tips and tricks about hunting from the observations I've made as I played. The most important piece of information is that animals in this game are the dumbest I've ever seen. They simply refuse to react to arrows that land near them, and even to arrows that hit. But their flight response gets triggered if you get close because prey is programmed to keep its distance from you. If you stay far and shower a stag with arrows, it stays there until you hit it enough times for it to give up on life. But take one step closer than it allows, and the prey sprints away. At least until the distance is settled, and then it goes back to being passive. When passive, some of these animals can actually walk towards you, becoming easy targets, at least until they realize that it's a bad idea. One trick you can use to hunt fast animals, such as deer, is to learn how to shoot your bow from horseback. The Huns did it, the Mongols did it, and they damn near conquered the world. Now I guess we can talk about archery, which is a bit tricky to increase early on, because at the first few levels it's pretty damn hard to hit anything. When Captain Bernard gives you soldier training, he'll also tell you a few things about archery, which I will not repeat. As he explains bowmanship, make sure you also shoot at the target to prevent him from saying this.
Well, that was awful. I didn't imagine a village yokel like you would have much skill, but you failed to meet even my low expectations.
There's not much I can say about archery because shooting a bow is pretty straightforward. You pull on the string with the left mouse button and once the bow is fully drawn, you release the arrow and observe where it flies. As you practice your archery, you'll develop a sense of where the arrow is going to hit. You can keep the bow fully drawn for a while, but doing so will tire you and make your arms shake, making it more and more difficult to aim, and if this goes on for too long, you'll drop the arrow and make noise, alerting any enemy you may have tried to snipe. To prevent this, you can cancel a shot if you just press the right mouse button. But it's best to get into the habit of releasing the arrow as soon as your bow is fully drawn, because this is how it was done historically. While I'm still talking about marksmanship, I'm going to share a few more observations. Note that these ideas are just common sense, but I found myself overlooking them and I want to prevent you from doing the same. Here we go. Whether on foot or on horseback, it's best if you come to a complete stop and avoid walking with your bow drawn, because doing so will negatively impact your aim. It's also wise to aim before you draw the bowstring, because adjusting the aim with the bow already drawn is way more difficult. Basically, the order is this: aim, draw, release. At early levels you can allow the natural sway of your weapon to point at your target. Also, as you practice archery, you'll miss a lot more shots than you land, so don't beat yourself up over it. Get used to missing, but try to avoid it when faced with enemies so as not to waste the element of surprise. Now, I've not tested this enough, but I'm pretty sure participating in archery contests and shooting at the target helps increase your marksmanship skill, just like shooting wild animals does. As I've already said, archery has no perks, but as you increase your skill you can draw a bow for longer, with steadier aim and improved accuracy. At high levels you even have a slight zoom when you draw your bow to help you aim better. One more thing I have to say about this subject is that you need to take a look at the bow you're planning to use. View the details of the item and make sure its strength requirement does not exceed your current strength level, because if it does, you won't fire your arrows very far. And before you reach archery level 5, wear an arm guard or you risk injury. And if you ever feel like you need to improve your skill instantly, you should drink a bowman's brew. Doing so is especially useful early on to steady your hand and help you train the skill. While we're still on the subject of archery, allow me to briefly talk about the types of arrows you will use throughout the game. There's simple arrows for simple people, there's hunting arrows which deal more damage to wild animals than humans. The long-distance arrows are lighter and fly farther away but deal less damage. The wounding arrows cause bleeding if they hit an unarmored body part. And the piercing arrows is what you should be using against armored opponents, because they can penetrate through their hard metal shell. Now, the Bowman's Brew I mentioned earlier is one of the many helpful potions that can boost your skills and make you better, faster, and stronger. We'll talk more about these potions once I have a word or two about the plants used to brew them. So, plants. I began this tutorial series by telling you how important herbalism is, so I will repeat some of the things I've said in there. You can increase this skill by gathering plants, and as your skill increases, you will collect herbs in a bigger and wider area. This skill also has useful perks. Flower power increases your charisma, Horsenip makes your horse a bit more courageous, Leg Day trains your strength as you collect plants, and Botanist increases the price of what you gathered. Out of all these perks, the last one is the least useful, because selling herbs is not a viable strategy to getting rich, especially since most vendors will pay you next to nothing for them. Still, if you insist on making money this way, I have to let you know that while the belladonna is the most valuable plant, it is far too rare to net you a tidy profit. Wormwood, however, is plentiful and can be sold for a decent price if you choose that route. Now let's have a few words about all of these plants and talk about some of the locations where you can find them in abundance. First of all, nettles, dandelions, valerian, and chamomile can be found pretty much everywhere. Comfrey, thistle, and wormwood can be found in abundance just outside the Neuhof stables. There's a whole field of them just outside waiting to be picked. The inn just outside Rottai has some fields with St. John's and sage plants. But the best place for plant gathering has to be the western and northern outskirts of Ujits. Here you'll find plenty of sage, marigold, and wormwood, and out of all the locations, this one has the highest concentration of the rare belladonna plant. I personally gathered about 100 belladonnas in about 5 minutes. Another such rare plant is herb Paris, and it can be found in forests alongside the deadly fly agaric mushrooms. Another such fungal ingredient is the cave mushroom, which is found in caves if its name is to be believed, but I haven't ever gone spelunking and that's not a fact I can confirm. When a potion asks me for such a mushroom, I tend to just purchase it off the herbalist. You can do so for every ingredient, you don't need to gather them yourself, unless you really want to increase the herbalism skill. Last but not least is the mint, which can be found near houses, most notably the millers. According to some people, there's a garden with mint just north of Merhoyed, and I also noticed such a garden in the Sassau monastery, so you can go there and pick it up. If you choose to increase your herbalism, you'll wind up with a lot of plants which you can then sell for quite a decent amount, but be careful selling these. You will need some of them for quests and others for alchemy, so you should keep about 200 units of each plant and only sell the excess. Now that we're done with all of that, it's time to talk about alchemy, which is a bit hard to understand at first, but once you grasp its basic concepts, it's rather easy to put into practice. First and foremost, in order to brew a potion, you will need to read its recipe. In case you've not watched the first episode, you can learn to read in Ujits. Once you are able to interpret texts, you can obtain potion recipes by either purchasing them from alchemists for a hefty price, or by putting those wealth redistribution skills into practice. Once you have a recipe, you add it to your collection, and next time you're at an alchemy station, you'll just have to flip through the pages of your notebook and select which potion you'd like to brew. Flipping through the pages can take some time if you have a lot of recipes, so if you can memorize the steps to brew your favorite potions, that's a useful skill to develop. Now, when you read certain potion recipes, you might see some words that will have you scratching your head. Some of these recipes have rather vague instructions. Cook, distill, grind. What do all these words mean? Worry not, my pupils, for I will teach you how to interpret recipes in no time if you'll just pay attention. First things first, when you look at a recipe, you'll see its description and instructions on the left and the required ingredients on the right. Let's begin with the ingredients of the Padfoot potion. First, you have a triangle pointing downwards labeled aqua, which represents the base of the potion, and then you have some ingredients. 1 X cobweb, 1 X eyebright, 1 valerian, 1 chamomile. Chamomile? Chamomile? Use whichever pronunciation you like. In my homeland we call it mușețel. If you have all of the ingredients in your inventory, you can use the prepare option to automatically get them ready for the brewing process. Once you do, they will be neatly placed on the alchemy station, but we won't talk about them right now because the first step of the brewing process is pouring the base into the cauldron. Now, the alchemical base is provided for free at every alchemy station, so you don't need to worry about it. These bases from left to right are water, wine, oil, and spirits. Make sure you use the correct base for the potion you're trying to brew. Once you pour the base liquid, you can start grabbing the ingredients and put them wherever the recipe guides you to. Now we can talk about those ingredients you placed on the table. 3 of these are plants, which are all placed into pouches on the upper shelf, while the cobweb is a special ingredient and it's placed below. Other special ingredients can be mushrooms, charcoals, or tusks. Now you can pick the herbs and drop them either into the cauldron or into the mortar or onto the dish if you have no use for them yet. But if you grab the special ingredient, you'll just dump it directly into the cauldron with no warning, so mind the steps of the potion. Some require you to put the special ingredient as the last step, and if you begin the brewing process by dropping that ingredient first, the process fails and you lose all of the ingredients you've put into the cauldron. With all that said, before you start adding ingredients to the potion, it's a good idea to take a look at the steps needed to brew it. Now, you've dropped the cobweb and the eyebright into the water, and the instructions tell you to boil it for 3 turns. So how do we do that? Well, you can measure these turns with the hourglass, or you can follow my guidance, but for that we'll need to talk about the 3 stages of cooking. At first, the cauldron is cool, but then as you use the bellows to warm the solution up, it will start simmering, and if you keep pulling on the bellows, the liquid starts boiling. Now, to boil this mixture for 3 turns, you need to do as follows. Pull on the bellows twice to make the liquid simmer for 1 turn, then pull twice more to add 1 turn of boiling heat. Here it gets tricky. Every single pull of the bellows you do after the first 2 adds 1 more turn of boiling. So if you want to boil the mixture for 3 turns, you do 2 pulls for simmering, 2 for the first turn of boiling, 1 for another turn, and 1 more pull for the final turn, for a total of 6 pulls of the bellows. After you do these pulls, you can verify how long the boiling lasts with the hourglass I mentioned earlier. Or is it the minute glass? It doesn't even last a minute. Anyway, once the 3 turns are over, it'll go back to simmering and eventually it will cool down if the bellows isn't used anymore. One rather vague instruction is cook, because both boiling and simmering are considered cooking, so if an instruction asks you to cook something for 2 turns and then let it cool down, you pull on the bellows 4 times to add 1 turn of boiling and another 1 of simmering. And when you leave the cauldron to cool, simply let the fire die out and turn the hourglass for 1 turn, and then proceed with the rest of the steps. Back to the Padfoot potion. You've poured the water in, you added the cobweb and the eyebright, and you've set it to boil for 3 turns with precisely 6 pulls of the bellows. The next step is to grind the valerian by dropping it into the mortar, and then using the mortar and pestle to turn the plant into a fine powder. If the mixture is still boiling after you finish the grinding process, you can pour the ground valerian onto the dish and wait for the boiling to stop. As soon as that happens, pick up the dish and drop the valerian into the cauldron and pull on the bellows again. When bubbles appear into the mixture, that indicates you begin the boiling process, and with the second pull of the bellows you confirm that you're going to boil it for 1 more turn. Now you are required to leave the solution to cool down, so if you need to take a break from the game and go make yourself some tea, now is the time. When you finish your tea, your solution is cooled down and you can grind the chamomile and dump it directly into the cauldron. Oh, and in case my statement about tea confused you, no, you don't have to wait that long for the cauldron to cool down. You can just grind the chamomile while the fire extinguishes, wait a couple of seconds and then drop it in. One last step that isn't added here but is present in a lot of other recipes is distill. To distill a potion you have to grab a file from the pile over here, hold it over distill and then complete the potion. You'll just have to pull on the bellows twice more. Congratulations, you've just brewed your first potion and it was a difficult one at that. By the way, the very first potion you can brew yourself without purchasing any recipe is the Savior Schnapps, and it's rather easy to brew. But even though you may be able to make sense of the recipe without the reading skill, the brewing will fail until you learn to properly read. That last statement is wrong, but instead of removing it, I am leaving it in the video to emphasize the importance of how wrong it is. As I was recording the brewing process done by an illiterate Henry to prove that it fails, I came to the realization that as long as you correctly follow the steps, you actually do brew the potion. And that realization forced me into another experiment where I brewed a Padfoot potion from memory without having unlocked the recipe. The result was a resounding success. The conclusion of my experiments proved that your character doesn't need to obtain the recipes or even be able to read, but as long as you remember how to brew a potion, you can do it as soon as you start the game. This can lead to some interesting playthroughs for this game. Now, to illustrate the brewing process even better, let's put a clip where I explain what I'm doing as I'm brewing the potion. The commentary in this next section is improvised, so bear with me. Alright, now it's finally time to brew a potion. For this example, I'm choosing the Bane potion because it has plenty of steps to help me demonstrate how alchemy works. As you can see, I already have 3 of these in my inventory, and we're going to observe how many I'll have by the time I'm finished cooking this batch. Start alchemy at the station here, and flip through the pages of the notebook until I find the recipe for the Bane potion. There it is. Description and instructions on the left, we ignore them for now. And on the right we have the ingredients. Vinum is the wine, it's the base of the potion. You have 1 fly agaric special ingredient, wormwood and 2 belladonna. The 1x and 2x represent handfuls, we'll talk about handfuls soon. Let's prepare the potion. You can see the ingredients got placed here on the upper shelf. The plants got placed on the upper shelf, the special ingredient down below. And we have the bases here. Now, as you can see, as I hover over these ingredients, the use button is grayed out. That's because I have not poured the base in. Once I do, the use button is usable. You don't want to press use on the fly agaric because, as you can see here, finally add the fly agaric, it's the last step. If we add it first, the potion will fail. Also the bases here, water, wine, oil and spirits. And let's look at the instructions. So, 1 handful of wormwood, 2 handfuls of belladonna, and fly agaric. Boil the wormwood for 2 turns, leave it to cool. Grind the belladonna, drop it into the cauldron, do not boil, and then we add the fly agaric and we can distill the potion. Now, on this step right here, where I've used an arrow to illustrate it, it says do not boil. That means you can leave it to simmer or you can leave it to cool, it does not matter. What matters is you do not boil. So, Let's review. Boil the wormwood for 2 turns, grind it, and drop it into the cauldron. Now, what's 1 handful? This is 1 handful. We take 1 wormwood, we drop it into the cauldron. Now we follow the exact steps, and we set it to boil. I start it, simmer, begin boiling, confirm boiling, and turn to off boiling. 4 pulls of the lever in total. We can use the sand glass to see how the time passes. It does not matter though. Now as this thing boils, we can grab 1 handful of belladonna, drop it into the mortar, another handful of belladonna, drop it into the mortar, and now we grind it. See, that's what the 2x is about. When you add the ingredients on the shelf, you add all of the ingredients. If you have 100 chamomile, you add all of them. And how many the handfuls you use basically determine... Excuse me for my brain fart. Yeah, the handfuls determine how many of those plants disappear from your inventory once you are done. Now, the cauldron has cooled down. Cauldron with the wormwood. We can basically add the dish in here, but we're gonna wait for 1 turn to cool down. To be sure, just be sure. Now, I can leave this to simmer. It does not matter. Warm it up, let it simmer. I could have let it to cool down. I did not need to pull the lever. It just says, do not boil. It does not boil. Now we can add the fly agaric. Boom, as you can see, as I click it, just drops it directly into the cauldron. And if you fail a potion, you're going to lose everything you've put into the cauldron. I think I already said this. Alright, now is the final step, distill. As you can see in there. We grab a file from the pile. And we use the potion. We use distill.
Could do with a bite to eat.
Of course, Henry is hungry. 2 more pulls of the bellows. And I should see the message, you have crafted the Bane potion. There we go. Exit, and let's see how many of these I've crafted. 7. So I have crafted a total of 4 potions, brewing just 1. That's pretty good. My skill is, let's see, 10 alchemy. And also have the bundle alchemist perk. Get 1 extra, so normally I'd brew 3 of these potions. You can also see these skills, routine and routine 2. Auto brewing produces 3 potions. But anyway, this was it for the demonstration. Let's go back to the video. I hope that wasn't too awful. So let us recap a little bit. There's potion bases available for free. There's the normal herbs and special ingredients which add certain properties to each potion. And there's the instructions. Grind this, boil that, cook this, leave it to cool, distill, rinse and repeat. As your skill in alchemy increases, you'll brew a higher amount of these potions from the same ingredients, and when the skill gets very high, you may even instantly auto-brew potions you already cooked before. Or if you really come to enjoy the brewing process, you may produce mass amounts of potions with a bundle alchemist perk, and then sell them for a tidy profit, especially if you benefit from the snake oil merchant perk. One last important perk I recommend you pick as soon as possible is Water of Life, because maximizing the healing you get from potions is always a smart option, even the hangover isn't that great. You can offset the drunkenness effects with perks from the drinking skill tree. And while we're at it, you can train almost every single skill if you find or purchase skill books. Since I have the Nightmare debuff, I spent the first 2 waking hours just progressing through various skill books I might have in my inventory. With all that said, I could extend this video by an additional 10 minutes talking about various skills and perks, but I'll just leave you to explore those on your own. There's nothing of value I can add to whatever information is already present in the game regarding those subjects. Read the codex and the tutorials and you'll have a solid foundation over any aspect I haven't already talked about. Well, I said pretty much everything that needed to be said about archery, hunting, herbalism and alchemy. Now, I was planning to make 5 videos for the medieval survival series, but I accidentally merged the trading tutorial, which was supposed to be the 5th, with the 2nd episode, the thievery tutorial. So in order to maintain the series at 5 episodes, in the final one I'll talk about some random tips and tricks, and how to combine skills and gear to create certain character classes. But the subject of today is exhausted and I will have to go, so thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.